Unreal. Yes, this is an actual PC game screenshot. Hell yeah, it is. When I was younger, my dad used to subscribe to official Xbox magazine, and I would cherish the demo discs that came included with them. We had Panzer Dragon Order, we had Dead or Alive, a heckin' Spy Hunter remake for some reason. I still don't understand that one. We also subscribed to the British Games TM and had been since that magazine launched in 2002. When I was 7, my dad moved out and suddenly his minimalistic bedroom, a space which you'd now recognise as a typical r/male living space, was punctuated by a monolithic stack of Games TM issues that he kept next to his bedside cabinet, long outgrowing any sensible bookshelf arrangement and one nudge away from completely submerging me in glossy magazine paper. When it was my dad's turn to play and for me to watch, I would sometimes roll over and grab whatever issue was on top. The subscription had long been cancelled by that point, and the time rift between myself and what was contained in those pages already felt evident. My dad commented on how much he loved watching me flick through a magazine that he was so invested in, often pointing out games that were slated for release by the end of that year, in an issue dated 3 years prior. In a retrospective issue, a glossy A4 page was carved out to depict a blown-up render from Grand Theft Auto 3 with Claude in all his boxy glory, and here I am looking at it again nearly 15 years later thinking, damn, he looked good! Why don't more games look like this? When Square Enix started creating games for the PS3, they ran into a HD problem. Creating assets for the newer console that looked good on the newer displays took infinitely more time to produce than before. Designers were described as dedicated sword makers, being really good at doing a lot of detail on assets one at a time, but suddenly this was going to become an issue. These attitudes led to games like the original 1.0 of Final Fantasy XIV containing plants that had more polygons than player models. Arguably, it has never been easier to replicate reality than it is today, and technical fidelity in our digital worlds make these mistakes easy to avoid, but does that mean we should still chase perfection? Countless designers spent who knows how many hours perfecting Aloy's Peach Fuzz just to get angry responses from neckbeards who have never been close enough to a woman to even see it firsthand. Video games were born ugly, and even though we have the ability, we shouldn't let them die beautiful. Space Funeral is a 2010 RPG Maker game by Stephen Gilmurphy, aka The Catamites. It looks diabolical, and that rocks. All of the sprites look like they're handmade in MS Paint, and the music is mostly lo-fi psychedelic noise rock from the 70s, cribbed from bands like, La Rallye des Nuits and Love. I've seen people refer to Space Funeral as a horror RPG, which I think is hilarious because yes, it's crude and uses gore and gothic imagery in parts. Oh wow, Dracula. But to call it horror betrays your own feelings towards punky non-conforming art. The big bad at the end of the game, Moon, is surprisingly relatable for a pulsing, shape-shifting red-blue fella. He says, "Nothing could be created that was not a pathetic mockery of the objects in the city." Which, damn, if that isn't some universal creative emotion, I don't know what is. If that isn't the exact feeling I'm feeling right now writing this, or I guess speaking this, or trying to produce my own music, or, there's always something better that I'm embarrassing myself with by in comparison. And Moon seems like a chill guy with some issues. Maybe he would like to go for a drink sometime. And he's dead. But the part that actually resonates with me about Space Funeral's ending, what is this shit? The perfection that Moon is enraged by is a default RPG Maker tileset. There is something incredible about the fact that the hand-drawn MS Paint sprites actually genuinely look a million times better than what the final boss would have you believe is a beautiful, unimprovable world. And it would be tempting to say that this is a double irony-laid joke the Catamites is pulling here, but all of his games sport like a pasta glue collage art style. This is a genuine attempt at synthesizing meaningful visuals through techniques we've seen in more sophisticated art forms for years, and one I think games need to embrace more wholeheartedly. One reading of the plot presents the ending as a purposeful uglifying of something pure, as a consequence of frustration, whether the anger is coming from a lack of ability, which I somewhat doubt, or resentment that the indie gaming and especially RPG Maker scene at the time was full of clones and generic designs. This last point becomes harder to internalise some 14 years after the release of games like Space Funeral or Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden, which are victims or beneficiaries of survivorship bias, their place in the sarcastic RPG Maker Games Hall of Fame being cemented by a decade of self-aware, ironic games that are influenced or are a symptom of those earlier titles, and all other attempts falling to the wayside. But I feel like we are seeing this in the AAA space, and maybe it's always been there. Games are being remade and stripped of their original identity. Mainstream producers are making pipelines that are unsustainable, and we are approaching double-digit year dev cycles being the norm, creating products that are becoming increasingly inaccessible to most of the world, either via their price point or technical requirements. 1 million Space Funerals could be made for the cost of just one Demon's Souls remastered, or Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and maybe I'm a sicko and no one else would want that, but there has to be a way for us to meet halfway.